What's happening, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Paul Brown here. This week I spoke to Aaron Jeffrey, who's all set to face Douglas Lima, the Bellator Champion Series on Saturday in San Diego. Jeffrey was last in action in March when he lost to Fabian Edwards in Belfast in Northern Ireland. And I kicked off the interview by asking him how he got on understanding the Belfast accent. Check it out.
Everybody was very cool and friendly, but yeah, man, I couldn't believe how difficult it was to understand. I was like, fuck, we're speaking the same language, but like, are we really speaking the same language? Especially after a couple beers in like a loud pub, man, there was times I would ask someone to repeat themselves like 10 times, and I was like, sorry, dude, I'm not going to get it.
Did you get to see any more of Ireland while you were here, or was it just straightforward focus for the fight and the fight week?
So for fight week, it was pretty focused. Didn't do a whole lot. Explored Belfast a little bit, and then I stayed for a week after the fight, actually, with my girlfriend and my mother, and we toured around a little bit.
Talking about that fight, then, a very tough, grueling type of matchup that you had with Fabian Edwards. How has the reset been since then? And obviously, you've got a massive fight coming up now, and a few months has kind of passed. So, how was the body after it? Because it was quite a tough physical matchup, and also mentally, how do you sort of reset and gather yourself and go again for something of this magnitude?
My body was fine. Maybe like a little couple bumps and bruises, whatever, but no injuries or anything, so that's good. Um, and mentally, like coming off a loss, I mean, I'm a pretty even killed guy, so I don't get too low on my lows or too high on my highs. I kind of stay even keel the whole time. But no, I just like I'll do the same thing, win or lose. I'll get back in the gym, get back to training, try to get better, and on to the next one.
In the Bellator middleweight division, you've had a sort of an interesting time of it. You've had some really, really good fights. You've beaten guys like Vanderford. You've fought against Fabian Edwards. Both of those guys coming off title shots. And of course, the fight with Fabian Edwards, I believe, was a number one contender fight. You also have a win over Dalton Rosta, who looked exceptional in his last outing. The fact that you're getting paired off with a lot of these guys, what does that say to you about the regard that the Bellator matchmakers have you in?
Yeah, it's good, man. I was just telling someone in a different interview, like they asked me what's it like when you get Douglas Lima coming off a loss, and I'm like, well, there's kind of two emotions. You can kind of feel like, oh fuck, man, like throw me a lob, let me get back in the win column. But then at the same time, it's a huge opportunity. Obviously, the promotion wants to keep me in big fights, even coming off a loss. I'm getting a legend of the sport, so it's sick, man. I like being in the big fights. It's it's just good opportunities when they keep feeding me these guys.
Yeah, and we'll talk a little bit about Douglas Lima now. I mean, he's a guy who's been around, of course, a former Bellator welterweight champion, and he's been around the sport, picked up some massive wins over the years. He is coming off a win. Prior to that, though, he had gone on a four-fight losing streak, albeit against some really good names. I mean, Mousasi, Amasov, MVP, and Jackson, three champions on the list there, and a current UFC superstar. So he is taking the toughest fights out there, but he hasn't really, prior to that last fight he won, he hasn't won a fight since before then was 2019. So where do you see him at the moment in regards to his level of quality and what kind of challenge he's going to pose to you?
Well, I would never underestimate or look past someone like that because, again, he's the legend of the sport. He's been around. He's got more fights in Bellator than I have in my whole career. So he's a veteran. His skill set is obviously very good. But yeah, I like to look at it honestly. He seems like he's kind of on the downside of his career. Maybe not quite as hungry as he was. Like he's done it all. He's been the champ. He's fought the who's who. But again, can't underestimate a guy like that who's been in there so many times.
Yeah, and obviously we spoke there about all the fights, or a handful of people that have managed to pick up wins over him. He has some pretty massive wins over the course of his career himself. I mean, the list of names there, the legends like Rory McDonald, Paul Daly, Lorenz Larkin, who's actually on the card next week as well. He is a win over MVP too, don't forget. So he has beaten a serious level of competition at various stages throughout his career. What does a win next week over him do for you?
Yeah, it's huge, man. like not even talking title contention or number one contender, any of this stuff. It's just a very nice feather in the cap in my career to beat a legend like that. Hopefully, it does put me right back up there near the title. That's the goal is to get that belt. But yeah, I mean to beat a guy like that is huge.
And you know, speaking about where you go directly after this fight, I mean, you're I'm presuming that you're going to be planning to be coming out of there with a victory under your belt, obviously. So, have you thought much about what the next 12 to 18 months looks like in your career?
Not really, man. Kind of taking it one fight at a time. Even like, especially after the merger and there was a lot of uncertainty there for a bit. It does seem like Bellator is going to be around kind of for the foreseeable future, but you never know in the sport. I want to take on this guy, get this win, and then go from there.
Okay, and just outside of your own fight, this week, I don't know if you got a chance to watch, but a former opponent of yours, Caio Borralho, picked up a massive
Hmm.
win to break into the top five of the UFC rankings. You fought against him a couple of years back on the Dana White Contender Series. You also squared off against, was it Brendan Allen, who's kind of making his way up there, and he's got an
Hmm.
interesting matchup there with, is it Nazardine Imavov? He's got that coming up, so he
Hmm.
has the opportunity
Yep.
also to break into that top five. We're seeing some fresh blood really start to come to the fore in that division too, in that rival promotion. You know, you've got the top end of the division. You've got some legends like Whitaker and Adesanya and former champ like Strickland kind of blocking the way at the top. But we are seeing a handful of guys kind of from your generation now starting to really rise to the top. Did you watch Caio Borralho's fight last weekend, or have you watched much of his progress in the UFC, given that you're former opponents?
Yeah, man. I always like to keep an eye on the guys that I fought, and me and Kyle have like stayed in touch a little bit after the fight. We trained together once after, um, cheered each other on always in all of our fights. I followed his career. He's a good dude, and yeah, man, he is a beast. He looked very good in that fight. Um, Showed like resiliency. Shows he's got that dog in him. Like he took some shots and just looked good the whole time.
Awesome. Well, listen, Aaron, I want to thank you very much for your time. I'm very pleased to speak to you today, and I wish you all the best in your big fight this week. Take it easy, brother.
Thank you, man. Appreciate it.